Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you, Eric?
I'm actually a little out of it today. I'm a little upset. We don't usually talk about current events on this show, but we've also, in all the time that we've been doing this podcast, never had a terrorist attack of the size that hit Israel this weekend. So it's knocked me about. We're not going to go into too much of it. Um, I do recommend, if any of our listeners want to hear more about what's going on and keep up with it, please listen to our sister podcasts, Carnivore Radio and Raw Naked Truth. Those cover news and current events. But I just want to say, that we stand with Israel, and what went on this weekend was absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And, it was terribly traumatic. And as traumatic as it was, there are people that deal with trauma in their day-to-day lives because of domestic violence. And that is why we have a very special guest here today, Catana Malinowski, who helps women deal with the trauma of domestic violence in numerous ways. Catana, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you, Eric. My name is Catana Malinowski, and I am a transformation art and wellness strategist that works with women who've experienced domestic violence and violence to help them find more joy and peace in their lives. And my mission is to reduce violence against women in the United States by 1% over 10 years.
That's fantastic. And I know, you offer a number of things, but one of the things you've mentioned is transformational art. So can you define what that is for us?
Transformational art is a process, an art process that that helps people walk through the memories and the experiences in a safe and cathartic manner so that they can reclaim their power over these experiences and develop skills that they can walk away with and use every single day. The transformational art involves writing, it involves drawing, and it involves meditation and discussions. And I've had tremendous success. And right now it's kind of in another form of transformation itself. I am meeting people where they're at because, as many people know, when it comes to survivors of domestic violence, they're not always out in the open. So I meet with people that are potentially in the shadows, and they don't always have a lot to offer. So I accept what they have to offer to me. That can be food, that can be money, that can just be a hug. But I do work with everybody. And over the last 2 months, I've had the benefit of working probably with a couple hundred people. And the hugs and the feedback are for me, priceless.
Absolutely. So how did you get involved with this?
So I grew up mentally, physically, and sexually abused. I've been raped multiple times. I experienced systemic abuse, primarily in the education and judicial system. And then I was in a toxic marriage for 31 years that led me down a road that involved gaslighting, which I didn't understand until a few years ago after I got divorced. I didn't even know if I was real. I was calling people, my mother, my friends, and asking if we were actually having real conversations. And then I wasn't even sure if that in itself was real. During my bachelor's degree final semester, I created a photographic project, black and white, visual autobiography of abuse and neglect. And that was my catharsis. that was when I reclaimed my power, and that is when the process was born.
Nice. Now, I just want to clarify for our listeners, because I've actually come across a number of people who are not familiar with the term. Gaslighting is when somebody is being convinced that they are insane. And it actually takes its name from an old Ingrid Bergman movie, Gaslight, in which she is the victim of this from her abusive husband.
Yes. And catharsis. I understand that not everybody understands that word either. And it's just removing something. It's removing the bad and retaining the good.
So how does the transformational art process start?
It starts with free writing. We go through writing exercises, and it's a free moment. So it's not about setting it up. You want to come in and you do a free writing exercise that's about 3 to 7 sentences long. And from that, then you're going to pick out 3 to 5 words that stand out from that moment. So it can be something that's stressing you currently, or it could be something from before, because as we know, when you're dealing with past traumas, things bother you now, and we don't often understand those links. And sometimes going through that free writing process, we start to develop a connection to those links. So the 3 to 5 words you pick out, then you do sketches for them. And the best part of that for me is that everybody immediately says, I'm not an artist. And that's my favorite part, bringing out the artist in everybody, because truly we all artists inside. And it can be anything from scribbling, we often doodle when we're talking. And I'm going to date myself here. We used to do it when we were on the phone, a corded phone,
Yeah.
or even a non-corded phone. But when we were talking with people on the phone, we would doodle, I even do earth art, which is using objects that are outside, so that people can get outside and create a little art space and leave it, so that we're not disrupting the earth, but we're kind of leaving it there, and it's a found object, leaving very little carbon imprint. So we go through the little sketches, and then we talk about that. And as you're going through the writing exercise, there's meditation music that I found one day, and it's to remove negative energy. It's beautiful. It works wonders. And from there, then we start to go into more, okay, so let's delve into more of those, depending on whether or not it's a one and done, because this exercise can be done once, or it can be done many times, depending on the person. I have a monthly program that takes people through wellness exercises as well, in conjunction with the transformational art, so that they can continue to build on that and discover that freedom and joy and peace. But then we go into bigger drawings and more composite drawings that they then get to develop. Either they will look at it in the form that it is, or some of my people will like to see what their future is. So they set it up so that their pictures show what they're looking for, which is absolutely incredible. I love it. I've had both, and no, there's no wrong way to do it. That's the best part. There is no wrong way to do it.
Yeah, imagine, what a lot of this is all about is our minds are going a million miles a minute all the time. And most of the time they're just out of control, thinking about this and thinking about that and whatever. And obviously what your transformation art's doing and what the meditation's doing, and even going outside and doing the earth art, is distracting you for the minute by concentrating on something else. And by focusing your attention on something else rather than the past or worrying about the future, basically it's not rocket science, and it's a cure, obviously, for a lot of things that you've been through, but it's a cure for a whole lot of other things. And if we can all just get into the habit of being able to take that time out and concentrate just on the present moment, because the present moment can be used to appreciate what's out there, but it can also be wasted living in the past and worrying about the future. So I'm sure that that's what you're driving home with people. I mean, we're the only creatures that God created that live in the past and worry about the future. Go outside and watch all your wildlife and your plants and everything else, and they're just there. And if we can get back to that, I love the earth art thing and being able to just look outside and just appreciate what's there. And I'm sure that just taking a nice meditative walk and just enjoying what's right in front of you. If you could get into the habit of doing that more and more and more, I'm sure that that's a big piece of the puzzle, and that you train people to do that. And it looks like you work with individuals, but you also do this in group format too, right?
Correct. And it's really wonderful. I actually was blessed to work with somebody that I know from another group that I'm a part of, and they never show themselves on camera. And they joined the class one month, and they were on camera the whole time. And now they do their own little shorts where they're on camera regularly. So what we see is something small and possibly insignificant really actually can be so very empowering.
So their past trauma, essentially, I guess they were uncomfortable with their appearance, and as you went through this, you helped them, grow into that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned that during the process, sometimes people will say, "Oh, I'm not an artist." How
Yes.
how do you get them past that barrier?
I show them how simple it can be. So I demonstrate. I also do these exercises with everybody so that it's a sharing experience. Safe and sacred space is what I always let them know, is that no matter what you say, no matter what you see, that it's a safe and sacred space. We're not here to judge. We're not ourselves, especially. That's a real key thing to
Yes.
learn. It's something that's I've had to learn is to not judge ourselves. And I said, do you remember back to kindergarten when you would draw a simple circle or a triangle? And they would say, yes. I said, well, now you can do whatever format you want. If you want to move the dust around, I know you say wash me on some of your cars. So if you can use your finger to push dust around, you can do this. It's really that simple in terms of actually doing it. And they're really surprised, and they'll go, oh my gosh, it looks so terrible. I'm like, no, whatever it looks like, that's what it's meant to be. As long as you understand it, you see it, and you recognize it, that's all it's meant to be. And they grow with it, and they start to feel secure with that, because nothing in the world is actually perfect. Everything is perfectly imperfect. That's how I see it. And because we are enough just the way we are. And I think that's what I like to bring forth in other people, is understanding that we are enough just the way we are.
Yeah, that's great. We talk a lot about the importance of not judging yourself. And in fact, Chip very often uses an example of a courtroom. Chip, you want to share that analogy?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about, part of the thing that I do is I talk about positivity and developing a positive mindset. Basically, you have tools for doing that, and then your maintenance method is gratitude, and then the most important thing are the throwouts. And this is criticizing, complaining, and all this other stuff. And the most important thing to remember, which I'm sure you tell people, is we all come from the same source, which is good. But when people start assuming about making assumptions about people, which I think, obviously the book, the 5 Agreements by Paulo Coelho is just amazing. But making assumptions and taking things personally are really, really tough. And the bottom line is, when we're born as kids, and I'm a grandpa, I got almost 4-year-old, year and a half, and the kids, basically, they start out no words or anything, they're just observing. And then they grow up, and then the influences start coming in, and then the head cases and the feelings of inadequacy and the need to protect yourselves come in, and so on and so forth. So when I get people to a frenzy talking about all these influences, I say, guess what? I'm going to use this example here of the courtroom in your mind. And what the courtroom in your mind is, I show this slide, and the courtroom is empty. And you are the judge, you are the accused, and there's nobody in the jury box. And I say, well, where are the jurors? They're all in their own courtrooms. No matter what you think of other people or how cool they are or confident and so on and so forth, they're all going through the same thing you are in different ways. And that's just the way it is. That's part of being human. So all I am, besides the happiness and success GPS, is just a voice of awareness. And so are you. Basically, if you're aware that you can go to these places and do these things and so on to see the way things really, really are in the present moment, that's the most important thing. But yeah, that's a really powerful slide that I use during my presentations, is the courtroom in our own mind, because we're all in our own courtrooms. And the bottom line is we're the only ones there. So we're clobbering ourselves for what?
Yes. And I believe that what you said, understanding that we're not alone. So everybody has their own courtroom. That's a beautiful metaphor. I love that, because we're not alone. We're all struggling with our own things. And I think that when people realize they're not alone, that makes all the difference in the world.
Nope. You can use that image as much as you want.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is so important to realize that what you have gone through is not necessarily unique to you. There are other people that have gone through similar things and understand it. And it is easier to get through the trauma together than it is trying to do it on your own.
Oh, absolutely. And I am a firm believer that speaking up and speaking out is how we're going to move into a healing space that will transform that violence. In my case, with the domestic violence, I believe we can reduce that by that understanding of knowing that we're not alone and that it's safe to speak up. Because I can remember growing up and hearing that, you never, don't talk about your dirty laundry, don't air the bad things. And that's what the abusers are relying on, is that fear of speaking up and speaking out and trusting someone. And that can be a real difficult part.
So how do you bring people to that point where they finally do feel that they can talk about it, that they can trust someone? I mean, even, you said you start out with the free writing, but there's got to be something there that allows them to free write about these things, and feel comfortable about it.
Yes. And I do have a website. It is currently being updated because I did move and there's some transitions that have gone through it. But my website, sorry, dealing with a little bit of smoke in the air. And so one of the first things I do is I connect with them. So I help them understand that I have been there. I've done that. I've lived it. I've feared it for decades. And that I've worked with people that have also been in that same space. So the more that they see that connection, I also have another website that I'm actually updating. It's Catana's Story. And it's my visual autobiography that I have actually shown worldwide. I am a international and national first place award-winning fine art photographer that has used that work. And so I've reached people actually feel comfortable talking with me. So that's a plus. And so when I let them know, that I've been there and that I've been through those with them, And that, yes, I trusted people and I got bit. It didn't always work, but I kept going, put one foot in front of the other, don't give up. And it just seems to work.
So, I mean, the artwork seems to be an ongoing theme here. As a fine art photographer, did your photography help you come to grips with your trauma? Is that, something you used as a tool?
Absolutely. From the time I could pick up a pencil at the age of 2, I began drawing. And when I was feeling alone because of the abuse that was going on at home and at school, I retreated to my drawings and retreated to my artwork. I did poetry, I did drawings. I also do paintings, drawings, sculpture, and I love it. I couldn't possibly be in a happier space with that. And being able to share that with other people brings me joy and peace.
Yeah, there's a bit of mindfulness in that, as when you're focusing on your art, you're just there in the moment. Nothing else matters, just what you're doing at that point. And we talk a lot about mindfulness on this podcast, and it is a very important pause to help not just deal with trauma, but even just making day-to-day decisions.
Yes. Yes. And that is one of the reasons why I go ahead and do the free writing. I have actually allowed people to guide me in understanding how this actually can help in other ways. So the trauma isn't just about our past. We deal with traumas from our dogs dying to tires blowing up when we're on our way to work, and I'm giving real life examples that have happened to people, being in meetings where they felt that somebody was particularly picking on them, and they're able to take those moments and write them down and see it from a constructive way, so they can break it down and break it into pieces and go, oh, okay, well, maybe that wasn't what I thought it was, or maybe it's exactly what I thought it was. But it gives them a moment to, as you have said, pause, breathe. Breathe is my go-to. So the first thing I do is always tell people, take a nice deep breath and let it out nice and slow. Because I know how helpful that has been for me. And it is that moment where we get to just go, oh, okay. And then they get to evaluate. It's not based on my evaluation. It's based off of their own evaluations. And I think empowering people to see those things their way is a big part of that.
Yeah, obviously one of the greatest things about doing your photography, when I talk about tools for developing a positive mindset, I start with easy stuff like smiling, giving yourself a high five in the mirror, and so on and so forth. But I also talk about visuals. And I've been working out of my home for a long, long time. And I know that I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, but I'm very big into calendars where I have pictures of my family and so on and so forth. And I'm sitting at my desk, which is like this. So I have 3 different panels going, and I'm looking at the last 5 years of my calendars with family pictures on there. And with you, as far as the pictures that you're taking nature-wise, and if you teach people to do the art and so on and so forth, if they can make their house or have a room to go into where they can escape and look at all the beautiful things that are out there, obviously that's a really, really big part about developing a positive mindset. And it's something you can always go back to. And obviously related to that is a gratitude journal. And if you can think about how grateful you are when you did this in the first place, and how grateful you are that it's there now, and these are happy memories that you can go back to no matter what's going on. Obviously, we got to trick this into shifting towards the positive. And, when it comes to experiencing other people, I use a lot of quotes in my presentations. One of my favorites is, what other people think about you is none of your business.
Yes.
You have no idea what's going on in their life, and there's nothing you can do to control that. The only person you control is that person in the mirror, that person in the courtroom. So that's it.
That's beautiful. Yes, that's part of my wellness strategy, are the gratitude journals.
Yep. Do it
Yes.
every day. Make sure you read them.
Very true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Write them,
Very
read
true.
them. Yep.
So you had touched on something a little while ago, the fact that when someone has had trauma, something completely unrelated, a tire blowing up, can bring things back and and cause an effect that has nothing to do with the event that triggered it. How do you get people to recognize when something is causing a trauma or when something is just triggering previous trauma?
That comes through the writing exercises, which is something that, one experience, you can walk away with that tool forever. And if they can take that moment to be in the moment, which is what Chip was talking about, to be present. If we can just pull ourselves into the present moment and go, oh, okay, this is making me feel like when that happened, or, we have a lot of negative self-talk in our heads. And I'm pretty sure, that's pretty shared. So far, my experiences have been 100% that people have some form of negative self-talk. And that's something that we've been conditioned through from childhood. It could be as simple as, well, you didn't get the A, you got a B. And that will stick with you. Oh, well, I didn't do this, so that happened. And just finding those relative ways that they show up and being able to go back and look at these. So if you're keeping these experiences, these free writes in a journal, which I encourage every person to do, a spiral, it doesn't have to be blank pages, because oftentimes blank pages scare the heck out of people. I know canvases have paused me for a long time. But I learned that if I wrote on lined paper, if I drew on lined paper, I wasn't as worried about getting it out there. So I often tell people to use a spiral, but to continue doing it. And like you say, Chip, go back and read it, look at it, and see what you came up with in that experience, in that moment, and that exercise that we took away from that.
Excellent. So we are coming up on the end of our time here. So if somebody has had a trauma, if somebody is a victim of domestic violence and they want to reach out and get help from you, how can they do it?
They can reach out to me at Catana, Catanal Malinowski, MALINOWSKI at gmail.com. That is the fastest, most quick way to get a hold of me, or on Facebook. And that is at Catana Malinowski. They can follow me there. And I am more concerned about helping people than actually erecting websites. But my website does have examples of work that people have done. And I've worked with everybody from therapists that work with people and thought they had worked through their traumas and still found some things that were showing up in their profiles. So those are coming up and coming, and I will share those as they become more available.
Fantastic. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, first of all, this has just been a wonderful session, and God bless you for what you're doing. But I love that you're not alone and it's safe to speak up. Going back to simplify things, way back in the Garden of Eden, we violated the tree of knowledge. And as soon as we ate that apple, we went from being source to trying to figure things out. And we've been doing that ever since then. And that's been the source of all the conflicts that we've had. I'm very, very, very much simplifying things to where we are right now. That's influences and so on and so forth. So it's no different now than it was then, that they just had different problems growing up. I love Lao Tzu. 3 things to learn in life. Your 3 greatest treasures: simplicity, patience, compassion. Simplicity is just looking at that present moment event and just dumbing it down to the simple things. And then the patience is that pregnant pause between your reaction, which is a feeling, and how you respond to things, which is the action, which can be silence, doing nothing, changing the subject, a whole lot of things. But again, that's just another little trick to do there. If you go online and Google that, you can find that. But it's so important to put things into perspective. And that's what you are doing for people, is just going back to the simplicity there. We all came from the same source. We are all great. God loves us no matter what. And that's, that's the way it is. Just like Walter Cronkite used to finish the news with 50 years ago.
Excellent. Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaways are certainly you are not alone, and that other people have gone through similar traumas and you can get through this together. But I think even more than that, it's the fact that you can get through this. You can get past it. We don't have to continue to be victims. We can deal with the trauma and be able to move on to positive lives. And I think that's so important for people to realize. So, Catana, thank you so much for being with us this week.
Thank you for having me on the show.
It's our pleasure. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode of the Success Showcase at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.